It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. Thank you for joining me here today. I am Ivy Slater, and I am thrilled to introduce you to an amazing, inspirational woman. Vanessa Simpkins has dedicated her career to empowering women in life, love, business, teaching women how to rescue themselves, become conscious creators, and make their own definition of success, which is where Vanessa and I are going to be jumping in. You know, we have the opportunity, I am so, have to tell you, I am so lucky, listeners, to meet amazing people. And every person who comes onto Her Success Story, I spend time with beforehand, and not just before we interview, but really just chatting and learning about the person, their lives, our commonality. And when Vanessa and I were talking, lovely conversation that was going in 1,000 different directions, and I was like, oh my goodness, I would just want to get on a plane and hang with you. One of the things that came forth for me is how Vanessa and I have certain things in common. Vanessa has been an incredibly successful businesswoman in her own right. And she's a brave, daring, ambitious, and intuitive woman. So Vanessa, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ivy. I'm glad to be here.
So I didn't even talk about what your business is. I didn't even say anything. So why don't you share a little bit of your background and how you came to being the successful woman you are today?
Well, you know, it all started out by sharing a story that I never wanted to share about leaving a toxic relationship. In 2014, I published a book, Take Your Power Back Now, The Ultimate Confidence Guide for Women. It was about the story of, you know, nearly dying in a hotel room and healing from a toxic relationship. And that launched a global women's empowerment movement. And my business kind of felt like a freight train that I was hanging on to for dear life, and empowered thousands of women around the world, teaching them about how to overcome fear and thrive, how to become conscious creators, how to take their power back now from, make their own money and be a choice in relationship, because I think that's why a lot of women stay in bad jobs or bad relationships, because of fear and money. And so it was like, I've been on like a 15-year kind of, train ride. I've worked with just incredible spiritual women, coaches, healers, consultants, speakers. And it's been an incredible journey helping them, heal from visibility blocks, shame, the inner world, the inner working. And I've always used my intuition. And it's, several of my clients are 6- and 7-figure earners now. It's so rad. Like, my past clients call me up to interview me on their television shows. I'm like, wow, you guys, and I don't take credit for that, because they've obviously worked really hard and continued. But many of my clients have gotten started in the coaching world or, visibility world, influencer world, through my programs. So that's a little bit about how this all started.
And then, so you built this massively successful business, and then you made that decision that it didn't serve you any longer.
Well, I thought I was going to die. So to be quite honest, in 2019, the business did $3.5 million. I had 30 people working for me, running, high-end mastermind programs, live events, retreats. I mean, all the things. I was married, and the success felt like, wow, I felt like, I was going to die. I was so stressed out. And somewhere I was like, well, it's like I lost myself, and I didn't enjoy my life anymore. I didn't enjoy my business. It felt like a job, like I was trapped, and I didn't, the things that I was teaching. I ran this 10K and 30-day mastermind program for 10 years. It was outrageously successful. But I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live my life this way anymore. So there was like this huge controversy, struggle inside of a lot of things, letting people down. This is where we got, in this conversation of
Yeah,
transformation.
exactly.
Like, how do you deal with kind of the guilt of choosing your own happiness, your expansion, evolution, and let people down. These people want to, my team wants to continue running this way. I don't, I don't want
right. There's this feeling, a sense of responsibility, because every person we employ, whether that be or 1099, it doesn't matter. They're paying their bills based on our business. And you feel this commitment to them. You feel a responsibility. And so it's can be, you could take on a sense of guilt when you make that decision. And I've been in these shoes, and I've done it a couple of times in my life. When I made the decision to do what was best for me first. And there's a lot of weight to it. And I remember, for me, the conversation that I had with my former business partner, and I said, we need to go take a walk. And I said, we need to plan my exit. I can't do this anymore. I'm not in this long term. Mm-hmm. And we had a several million in sales, et cetera, and then some, and people and responsibility. And I said, we need to shift how this is going to look without me. And what is that going to look like? And what can happen? In what period of time do we need to make that happen? Yeah. From clients to team to partnerships.
Yeah. And it's really about confronting, like having those hard conversations in a safe way. I mean, I haven't always been good at that, either in my marriage or in business. I was afraid of disappointing people. I was afraid of confronting people or letting them down. But ultimately, in the end, it was myself that I was letting down. And I mean, what good is your business if you're not around for it anymore? I remember leaving a yoga studio thinking, well, maybe if I got hit by a car, that'd be a good way out of this mess. And so I went through like a massive, and my ex-husband and my sister were like, you're depressed, go and see get some pills. I was like, oh, heck no, I'm a healer, man. This is all emotional. I know how to do this. I'm going to, hire the right mentor and do all the inner work, and really dove deep into some of the most profound inner work I've ever encountered. Shadow work, reparenting my inner child, which has been such an incredible blessing and turned my life into really a magic carpet ride of reinvention, of next evolution of you, of peace, of my psychic gifts, intuitive gifts really coming online in a much more profound way. That's been, very intense. I live in a very spiritual, transformational place here in Northern California, Mount Shasta. People come from all around the planet to experience a lot of healing and transformation here. I travel between here and Kauai, Hawaii, another magical vortex. With a lot of artists and community and music and healing. And it feels great to be on the other side of.
Right. So let's talk about getting from there to here.
Yeah.
Okay. So it starts with decisions. It starts with letting go. And there's the practical and that inner peace. And they're powerful.
Well, there's a 3-step process that I've always taught women, and it applies here too. I just have some different tools now, and I call this, step 1 is radical. Let's take a radically honest look at your beliefs, what's working, what's not working, how you feel. Let's take a radically honest look at what's going on inside, in the subconscious, in your body. Right. I learned so much about trauma bonds. I learned so much about going through a divorce. Like, wow. I mean, deep dive into all these areas. So radical honesty is step 1. And then taking radical responsibility. You're not happy or you're not, fulfilled. I just felt like there was more here. Like there's so much more. I don't want to be talking about just confidence and cash flow. And that was like such a great ride, but there's a heck of a lot more here. So, taking radical responsibility for your happiness, your fulfillment, your soul. I traded in a lot of money and a lot of, I don't know, you might call it fame or success.
Notoriety.
People
say the word
identity, but I traded it in for my soul.
And you know what?
You can't put a price tag on that.
You cannot. And so sometimes we create a self-identity based on how people see us.
That's the ego. Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then when we get caught up in the, and I'll put it as confusion between how they see us, how we see and believe in ourselves.
Yeah.
And then you have to make some choices of how you want to live your life and lead your life on your terms.
Yeah. And it's going to affect a lot of people. So, I mean, I moved from Southern California, San Diego. I was going to buy $1 million house, pull that escrow over there, moved up to my mountain house here in Mount Shasta, got divorced, restructured my business. I mean, if you want to talk about loss of identity, Vanessa was like, well, who am I if I'm not this baller multimillionaire? Who am I if I'm not married to this person? Who am I if I don't live in that location with all those friends and locked up in a pandemic? And, you know, I mean, Mount Shasta has like 13 crystal shops and 2 coffee shops. Like there's nobody here, you know, but I got this big, beautiful mountain. I got these big, huge trees. I got a lake down the street, mountains everywhere. I live in a bowl full of mountains. So this identity, this piece on identity is massive. And I've had the privilege of working with phenomenal women, healers, you know, spiritual leaders. And, you know, we look at this identity. I'm really kind of interested in looking at shame. You know, I always have been. I always help women, you know, break through their visibility, but there's like a whole other piece of like body shame and photography. So let's go back to like step 1, radical honesty. Step 2 is radical responsibility, right? For the your happiness, your fulfillment, your peace, right? Success on your terms. What does that look like? And then step 3 is taking, you know, having enough radical self-love to do things differently, to try new things, to take that risk, maybe to make, you know, to install a new habit, to show up differently, to, you know, for me, I've been, you know, an artist my whole life. And now I've decided, well, it's time to show the world kind of some racy photos and maybe launch these, you know, NFTs and artwork and do more in the creative space. So those are the 3, I think, trying to, you know, break things into a practical framework that people can follow on this journey of, you know, new beginnings, magic carpet ride, reinvention, next evolution of you.
So in the reinvention of you, Vanessa, where has your business evolution, right? So when you say you're taking more creativity, you're still really working with dynamic, amazing women on such a higher level versus the nuts and bolts level.
Yeah. You know, I hate writing books. Like I have 2 books, but I dread it. And I have this like wheel and deal conversation with God all the time. I'm like, dang, you know, I surrender. Like I'll do anything you want me to do. But I hate writing books. And there's another book coming out like called I think they call it Cosmic Love. And it's really about, you know, this journey of how God speaks to me in signs and symbols and intuition and feeling and knowing, dreams. But I feel like the women that I'm attracting, you know, the women that have gone through my programs, they're committed. They're love leaders. I call them, you know, like love leaders and rock stars. And I think the world now needs so much healing and so many light workers to really get out there. So I'm still committed to helping women with that. And I've had a really great time inviting people like into this frequency here in my home in Mount Shasta and doing more private retreats. Some retreats also embodiment, you know, helping women heal all of the parts of themselves that keep them out of their, you know, really like authentic expression. Because there's so much fulfillment in, you know, being who you are, creativity. And this place in particular in Hawaii are just rad vortexes of transformation. So
well, I think it's very interesting, you know, when we look at our own authenticity and living an authentic life and being who we are at a deeper level, a soul level. There's and now, you know, Vanessa, you know, you're talking to somebody in New York City, so there's a lot of stuff that goes on here. Stuff that goes on here, and being able to connect with that authentic being, our authentic being, to be present, to plan from a place of heart versus a place of noise that goes on around us. And I think life has a lot of noise, and we can be challenged into being in tune with our inner beings. Take a lot of level of importance for myself and the companies, the company I build and the companies I work with, on making sure the leader and myself as a leader are in tune with who we are, why this is important to us, the impact we're making, the ripple effect. And it's coming from a place of truth versus a place of what's going on in the world and the universe and the noise and responding to other things versus from ourselves.
Yeah, one of the tools that I've really gotten into that helped me crack open to this being satisfied and living correctly and more authentically me was human design. I got into that at the beginning of 2020. And wow, so many insights. So, we have this mind or ego, these parts of ourselves that are not self. And so learning how to really be correct has been just an absolute game changer. One of my favorite parts of transformation has been learning human design. And I'm still very new, but I'm a 4/1, so I'm an opportunistic investigator with a very mystical, one of the most mystical channels of enlightenment and endarkenment. So we can all be led by ego, which is the fear, or we can let love lead. And I think that's been such a gift. Even with my ex-husband, it was kind of really hard for 3 years before we decided to divorce. But then once the decision made, it was very uneventful. And there's this, I can look at my relationships regardless of what somebody does or doesn't do from a place of unconditional love. And that is such a blessing and a gift. And if I look at, well, how does Vanessa define success? What does success mean for me? I used to chase like $1 million a month, man, let's go. And all these baller, bro mentors. And I'm just like, oh, heck no, it's peace. It's serenity. It's connection. It's letting love lead. It's unconditional love. It's intuition. It's, following guidance. That is the magic carpet, right? It's healing all of the parts inside that would prevent love from leading your life.
I love that. And I love when we lead with a sense of heart, as you're saying, a sense of love. It's important. It's important to know that we put ourselves and who we are as humans first. I also love the fact of tapping into our intuitions, because I truly believe we all are intuitive. And I know I will always say to my clients, like, so how is that gut check for you? How is that gut check for you? And as clients get to know me, they get it. I was like, very often in business, we don't talk about intuition, but it's very common to say, hey, have you checked in with your gut? And that there's very little differentiator there. Right? Because internally we have an enormous amount of knowledge.
Well, we all know, right? We've all had experiences where like, dang, I knew it. I had this feeling. And if I would have listened, it's learning to trust and surrender to that. So I just got a big tattoo. It says surrender with a big butterfly. And that's really been part of this surrendering to that I would say consciousness, God, source, spirit, whatever you want to call that higher power, call it Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I don't care. Just call it and communicate.
Just call it.
Surrendering to that and trusting that.
So if you had one tip for women leaders today, women who are building dynamic, fantastic businesses, what would it be?
I would say it's hard to just pick one, but I would say, make sure that you don't get lost in the process. It's great to serve. It's awesome. but it really sucks to serve so much that you abandon yourself. And if you really want to create something sustainable, something relatable, something impactful, it's also got to serve you. And not be afraid of burning down the old and making way for something new. What must die in order for
Touche.
something new to be born. Yeah.
Don't be afraid of letting go of things that no longer serve you to step into new.
And it's hard. I mean, it's really easy to say that on this podcast, but the actual physical application of that it's excruciating. You're going to go through all the colors of the rainbow of emotions. You're going to really, I always say, starting a business is like a full-on contact sport. It's the ultimate personal development journey. You're going to get your reflection of you everywhere you go, your relationships. Business is all about relationships.
Business is all about relationships. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, building businesses, for listeners, if you're new to listening to her success story, the first 2 businesses I tried to start never got off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it never stopped me from trying.
Yeah. One of the first businesses I ever started, I went bankrupt doing the first business. It was my first book, From Bankrupt to Making $900 a Day, selling mops and lint removers. So I got started in the most unglorious, scene of kind of being this pitching mops and lint removers. But that really created a foundation for, inner work and marketing and sales. So I always say failure is a lesson and success is a lesson applied.
So how can our listeners follow you, learn more about you, connect with you?
My website, takeyourpowerbacknow.com. It's a great place to connect. I'm on Facebook, Vanessa Simpkins. I'm on Instagram, Vanessa Simpkins, YouTube. Haven't been so much on there, but I'm on the social media channels. Have a Facebook group called The Next Evolution of You, where I have more intimate conversations and podcasts and live streams with women, really going through this process of reinvention, of burning down the old and making way for the new. So those are some ways people can connect.
Awesome. Listeners, what I always say at this point is take a moment, think about in this conversation what resonated with you, what made an impact for you. Write it down. Feel free to do it right in the show notes if that works for you. And then commit, what action are you going to take for yourself from listening today? Success is very often aligned in the actions we take and not in just digesting of knowledge. So listen, identify, take an action, and make the commitment. Thank you for joining us on Her Success Story. See you next week with more fabulous guests. If this episode was interesting to you, share that forward with your network and your friends. See you next time.
To shine.